break in, break through, break ahead, and break forward with everything that you do. Today's guest is Jason Loftus, who is a director, a producer, runs the production company Lofty Sky in Toronto, very active, all around great guy. He is the director of Eternal Spring, which is Canada's entry for the Academy Awards this year. Jason, thank you so much for being here. Good to see you.
Likewise, Adam, my pleasure.
Well, Jason, you've done so many things. And what we do in Breakthrough is accelerated mentoring tips because no one has a lot of time to get the mentoring tips because they need all their time to put them into action. Uh, just starting off, you've done so many things in your career. What's the first mentoring tip that you would give people that might have to do with the variety of things that people need to do to develop the skill sets that they need to move forward in the entertainment industry?
Yeah, filmmaking is very much, and storytelling across different mediums, it's all very multidisciplinary. And I think the more comfort you have in different aspects and the more familiarity you have with different aspects of the whole process, the stronger you will be and the more you'll open yourself up to different opportunities. So in our studio, I mean, we make narrative games, we do animation, we've done children's content, documentary series, and then of course, feature films. And this year, our film is the first time that Canada's entered an animated documentary in a foreign language, or now they call it the international feature category. So it's many of those things all in one. And I think we were able to create something unique because of the multidisciplinary work that we're doing. So, when you work in video games, you learn certain things that is something that you take with you when you work across all different mediums. It's not just something that you compartmentalize. So I've really, I think, grown and developed by that multidisciplinary approach, and I think it opens up opportunities. So I would say for people who are coming out, oftentimes when you come out of school, you think you might have a very defined idea of what you want to do, but don't be afraid of trying something different and gaining different types of experience. I mean, I myself went through engineering. I came to media and production sort of backwards through the producing side of it because I came more with like the business and how to get projects off the ground. And then I worked with directors who I respected and learned a lot from. And that gave me the comfort level to get into directing. So I would say take whatever opportunities are out there for you.
How and at what point did you start getting involved in video games?
I started really from the producing side of things. So I was able to help some others who I knew some friends or people I was collaborating with. I helped them to get projects off the ground. So even when I was in my engineering life before, pretty quickly they found, okay, this guy's good at, proposals and trying to find ways to put projects together and get money. And so I was doing that. And then I started doing that with some friends in the media side of things, got some projects off the ground, and I got pretty good at that. And so I ended up creating some projects for myself, and my sort of side gig of media and my interest in that became my full-time gig, and I left the engineering world behind. And then it was, the video games were starting, it was overlapping with the same sort of producing work that I was doing in animation and all of this. And then I had friends who were working in different disciplines, and we sort of brought one thing together, and that became the company that's now my company, which is Lofty Sky Entertainment.
And that really speaks to the variety of things that you just talked about, of how all these different pieces come together and braid in a way that retroactively makes sense. But as you're going forward, you don't really know what is going to come of it, right?
Well, I think part of it for me is I have a bit of an attention deficit issue. I'm excited by different things. I always like to try something new and to play with things. And I think those qualities, they can be frustrating sometimes for people around you. My wife is is much more, linear and focused, and so we sort of feed off each other. It's good to have people who are different around you. My wife is my producing partner. We run the company together. But I also feel like you really pick up a lot when you have this approach. So, as an example, Eternal Spring, a lot of people have watched this film and come up to me and said, I really appreciated the video game aesthetic you used. I thought that was unique. And I sort of had to scratch my head for a while because there was never a conscious effort to make a video game aesthetic. But what we were dealing with in the film were a number of film subjects who were from China, and we felt that their names would be difficult for people to keep track of, in a Western context. People would be, watching the film and who's this kind of thing. So we had this concern, and the way we addressed it was by having lower thirds popped up, and we were using the stories told through the lens of an artist. So we're using these sort of hand drawn, illustrated versions of the individuals. Their lower thirds, like a basically an icon or an image of the character, and then we would have their name below it, and this would go alongside the subtitles because the film is mostly in Mandarin. And it was just a solution that was in our minds of how to address this potential issue. But in hindsight, when I look back at it, it appears very much like a visual novel or a component of an RPG or a narrative game where you have like a character's icon appear and then a speech bubble beside them. And so for us, I think it's one of those things where when you're working across different mediums, you don't compartmentalize it. You don't say, well, I only use this when I'm in this situation. It just becomes another resource for you. And I think this helps you to create new things because there's things that you can learn across different mediums. I also feel when you're working in a specific medium, you start to learn more deeply about it when you also work in another space. So, for example, you understand what types of experiences and what types of stories are going to work well in a certain type of narrative game experience, or we work in virtual reality. VR is very, very intriguing, and I think it has a lot of strengths, but it also, I think, doesn't lend itself to the sort of linear narrative storytelling that we get in a feature film. I don't think it's ever going to replace it in that. And it's not just because the challenges of sitting with it, with this thing device on your head for so long. It's really about the conventions that are there. So when you're directing a narrative, or when you're directing a feature film, you have the opportunity to control the shot. If you want to express emotion, you're going to put a close-up shot. You control what people see. And in VR, you lose that. Like basically, there's 360 degrees. People can look anywhere. You don't necessarily. There's things that you can do to kind of cue where their focus is going to be, but you don't control it anymore. And you also don't have an external character or a film subject that you're basically projecting onto and empathizing with because everything is in the first person. So all of the conventions that you have in a film situation break down, but it's very powerful for creating empathy and for putting yourself into someone else's shoes. And so I think for this reason, it's like when you play with a medium, you learn to appreciate the limitations that it has, but also the strengths that it has. And I think that this helps you when you come back to another medium to kind of bring a new kind of fresh perspective to it and perhaps a toolkit that you've developed along the way.
So let's get into doors of access. Um, Maybe you could give some guidance on, is there one way to get in? Are there a lot of ways to get in? How many pathways are there, and how do you think about pathways to enter into a career in media?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I do see a lot of people, they get into film maybe with a specific idea in their minds about what they want to be in the film industry. I mean, there's a lot more people who want to be that auteur film director, and that isn't something that you usually get the opportunity to do right out of school. There's much fewer people who say, when they're younger, I want to be a sound supervisor, or, I want to be a film editor even. And there are many more opportunities in many cases for those roles. And I think it's largely because people don't understand what's involved in them. But you might find if you're open to different things that your personality and your skill set can make you, yes, perhaps you can direct something, but you might be an outstanding world class editor if you really follow that pathway. Or you might, be outstanding in post production or in sound or something like this. And so that kind of relates to what we were talking about before of building a well-rounded skill set, but then also being open to different things and just kind of exploring different opportunities. And you really have that opportunity when you're just coming out of school, when you've accumulated a few skills. It's really, don't be afraid of learning new things and don't be afraid of putting those things to use. And everything that you do, I don't think is a waste of time. You're going to gain an appreciation of another part of the industry, and you might actually find that there's something that really connects with something that you have, abilities that you have, that can help you to excel in an area that you may not even have been aware of before.
Yeah, there are so many different pathways, right? Including pathways we don't even dream about, and there are also pathways that we don't know about today that are going to be there tomorrow, which is because the
For
industry is
sure.
continually changing.
Things are changing so much. Yes, I agree with that. And that's why I think it is important that, and from another perspective too, things are so much more accessible, with just the ability even with your phones to to shoot things and just the barriers to entry are less, and so play with that. If you have passions, use them. Really, look for opportunities like what the great work you're doing with MediaU to really just you learn more things, hone them, just get to a point where you can put them to practice and then go out and do things. And that's really where you learn, hey, is this a fit for me or is this my strength? And that's really where you develop is by putting things into practice.
What about this thing called networking and how you do it, how it works, how important it is, how frightening it is? Could you talk about that and maybe give a tip for that?
Yeah, I mean, even though things are accessible nowadays, I would say like you can go and make your own film, just with your phone and a few friends and this type of thing. so often the projects that you really are going to want to realize, they're so multidisciplinary, they're large projects, and so there's so much that comes into it. And this is something that fascinated me, coming from a world where, I had this kind of interest in media and entertainment, but I was trained in engineering, and when I was first out of school, I worked in the space for a little bit, and it was quite a difference for me because I see all of the same demands on the business side and all of these things, and sometimes it's even more difficult getting projects going, in the film and entertainment space than it is in my previous sort of world. And at the same time, you have this added layer of all the creative, right? And you have to create something that people are going to connect with, and so there's all the artistic and creative aspects, and so it combines so many different things. It's very multidisciplinary. So, earlier we were talking about really expanding your own knowledge base and your own variety of skill sets, but you're still going to need to work with other people and work with other people very well. And I think there's this notion sometimes that, directing a project, it's all about having this brilliant vision that's totally yours. And there are people who, I mean, who are brilliant, who have like a very clear idea immediately of what they want to make. And, those people I think are quite rare. I think, and those things are also developed through a lot of experience. Quite often, I think the way you get a better project, and this is true for me in my own experience for sure, is surrounding yourself with wonderful people and really trying to bring the best out of them. And when you're early on in your career, those opportunities you get to work with other people. I mean, we produced a film together a number of years ago. I learned a great deal working and collaborating with you, and you were so generous with the knowledge and experience that you had accumulated through your experience in the industry, and I felt I gained a lot from that. And so I would really encourage people to treasure those opportunities when you get to work with other filmmakers, when you work with people who have experience that you don't have, or just perspectives or skills that you don't have. Treasure those things, be supportive of each other, and then when it's time for you to do your project, you can lean on those things. Don't be shy to ask people for advice. I mean, you can have a sense of when it's too much. So when I'm making a film, for example, especially in documentaries, I feel it's often this thing where you're sort of chipping away at a story and really trying to uncover what's there. And typically you're passionate about something because you've come across real life material that has connected with you, and what you're trying to do is create something that within the confines of the frame of the screen and the 90-minute format, you're able to convey that same experience to somebody else who doesn't have all the time to spend with the material and with the individuals that you have. And sometimes there's blind spots. There's inevitably going to be blind spots, and there's going to be things that you think connect with people that don't connect with people. And so I've always found it very helpful to have people around me, other filmmakers, friends who are in the industry, people who have kind of gone down these paths in similar ways and may have different experience, and be able to share pieces with them and get feedback. And I wouldn't lean on one person continuously, but I would maybe have a cut of something, and I would say, hey, can I show this to you and get your reactions? And I would do that with different people along the way. And I'm always picking up and accumulating things. You still need to have your own vision of what it is that you want to do, but you need to be responsive to what you're hearing from other people. And I really feel too, on a team, like Eternal Spring is, it's an animated documentary, very ambitious project for a small independent team and studio. And that wouldn't be possible if there was an environment where it was just like very top down, and you're just, here's what everyone has to do, here's your assignment, just do this. You really need to empower people to, you first surround yourself with very talented people who have great ideas and a wonderful attitude, and they're really trying to realize a shared vision. But then you empower them and you listen to ideas, and you really try and bring everyone's best onto the screen. So I think that's important. And I think as well, just treasuring those relationships, as I was talking about, with people you come across, other filmmakers, be there to support them, give them notes on their work, because their input and their support along the way can be extremely valuable for you when you need it as well.
Yeah, it's so true about surrounding yourself with people. I really believe that we become the 5 people we spend the most time with.
Hmm.
And we have to choose those people wisely. If we're around people who are negative, who are grumpy, who are emotionally needy in the wrong kinds of ways, who aren't supportive, we're going to become that person ourselves, and we don't want to go there. So we have to be really careful who we dial in, who we dial out on projects and in life. So speaking about life, Jason, you've been doing this for 1 or 2 years, maybe 3 or 4 years. Thinking back to yourself, maybe when you were 18 or 19 years old, what's one thing that you would tell your younger self that you know now that you didn't know then?
I mean, I think it's, I've been, first of all, I've been very fortunate to encounter and, at the right times, people who were great models for me. And I think that's a contributing factor. And for me to be able to do what I'm doing today is that I learned a lot of things. I think you have to be open to learning those things, but I really was fortunate to come across the people who gave me great advice and great examples through their own kind of how they approach their work. But I feel, with films, it's, you know, people have different motivations for why they do things. I think it's great to want to be successful, to want to share things with someone, but I would say it's really important to think beyond just the I want to achieve this, I want to be such and such director, is why are you doing this, right? And have something beyond just the, succeeding at what you're doing as a motivation. And I think for me that's been important in particular because I'm dealing with a lot of in my work real life human rights stories, things that are real life situations, and so there's this sort of humanitarian component that I think is important. But I think it's true no matter what you're doing because there's so many difficulties along the road to creating something great that if it is purely just the attention that you're going to get or the status or whatnot, it's not going to be enough to motivate you. And it's very interesting because I feel what you are thinking and what your motivations are so transparent when you create something. People can see an element of yourself reflected in your work. So I think it's important that you are also working on yourself and thinking about why it is that you want to tell these stories. What is it that you think is important about what you're sharing and what you're communicating that you think is, doing something, bringing something positive or bringing something that isn't already there that people can appreciate. And I think if you have that it's going to help you through those dark times when you feel like, okay, this thing might never get made or this thing might never pan out the way that I hoped it would. If you have those other motivations beyond just the end result success, I think it's going to help you get through those times, but also it's really going to end up reflecting on screen and people are going to feel that you had something else there.
Wow. We talk about these sessions as accelerated, really compact mentoring. Jason, you have exemplified that. Not only is it such a pleasure to have you as part of the MediaU family, and to have you as a friend, and you are so super smart. This is a great episode for people to rewatch and rewind and listen to the nuggets that you've dropped all the way through, because I feel like you've dropped about 100 nuggets in about 20 minutes. It's spectacular. Thank you so much for taking the time and for sharing the mentoring tips today.
My pleasure, Adam.